Thank you all for joining and welcome to today's strategic advocacy briefing with Sam Bahour and Fred Schlomka of the Green Olive Collective. My name is Erez Bleicher and I'm the Advocacy and Membership Director of the Green Olive Collective, an advocacy information and tour guiding center committed to a democratic future and an end to the ongoing displacement of Palestinians. We provide communities around the world with insight into the oppressive policies of the occupation and the resources to engage in meaningful advocacy in solidarity with Palestinians and human rights defenders, calling for an immediate ceasefire and the end of collective punishment in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. In this time of ongoing anguish, it is often difficult to know what we can do to express our solidarity and tangibly support Palestinians facing displacement, mass eviction, and unprecedented state violence. Bringing their decades of advocacy and expertise in human rights organizing to bear, Fred and Sam will speak with us today about meaningful and urgent ways we can act strategically in support of besieged Palestinian communities in the occupied West Bank. Fred founded the Green Olive Collective in 2007 and has overseen the steady growth of the organization ever since. He has been involved professionally with human rights advocacy for more than 20 years through his work with the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, ICAD, which no doubt many of you are familiar with, and countless other solidarity initiatives. And he was awarded a Social Entrepreneur Fellowship from the Echoing Green Foundation in New York for his work in the Middle East. Sam Bahour is a prolific advocate for justice, a pioneering business person, and a member of the Green Olive Collective. He is a Palestinian American who relocated to the West Bank after the Oslo Accords and threw himself into the development of the Palestinian economy in anticipation of Palestinian statehood. He was one of the core team that established the Palestine Telecommunications Company and is a joint founder of Americans for a Vibrant Palestinian Economy. Sam and Fred, your presence here is deeply appreciated, and we're truly grateful to have you both here. The last thing I'll say before passing to you, Sam, is that at the end of this session and of our briefing today, we will open for questions and conversation. So everyone should please feel free from this moment on to send questions in the chat as Sam and Fred speak. If you can please write question with a dash or colon after it at the start of your question so I can identify it, that would be wonderful. And I will hopefully be able to integrate them into questions and answers at the end. With that, sincere thanks again, Fred and Sam, and I'll pass to you, Sam, to share with us more. Are you able to unmute?
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction, Erez, and thanks everyone for coming. So many familiar faces. It's refreshing to see you all at such a dire time. When Erez and Fred reached out for me to present today, and saying that the topic was very direct, what can be done, I jumped on this because there's no more analysis that needs to be done. There's no more gathering of information that's going to add to our insight to the point where we know what needs to be done. Now, what is it that we can do to impact the reality on the ground? I think the topic was very timely. I put together a quick presentation just to present, even though I don't usually use presentations, but I thought it might be useful because I'm going to dump a lot of information out. This is by no means comprehensive. And what I put on these slides are basically things that I have personal knowledge of. There's many, many more efforts out there, and I would encourage you to post links to things that you know about that should be added in the future. So let's go to that, if I may, and we can talk about it as soon as we're done. Do you see the slides?
Yes, we do.
Okay. What to do? Imagine, I mean, what to do is a question that's even hard to ask given the magnitude of what we're facing. But we have no option but to ask the question to be able to start addressing and rebuilding Palestine. I will go through quickly a couple topics, some general guidelines that I had just put in mind as I speak to many groups, and many of you have been in the groups that I've spoken to. And I focus on getting political, focused, economic, and then engaging in sustainable solidarity. And again, like I said, this is not comprehensive. Some general guidelines that I focus on. One is for us all, if we're not already, to get uncomfortable. Palestine is not a sporting event that we visit once a week in a demonstration or otherwise. It is a lifestyle embedded with peace and justice. And I hope that what I present today will encourage that kind of a lifestyle. So it's part of our life and not just something that we're ticking off that we do to feel good, as important as that may be. And secondly, is to mobilize outside of our tent. We need to focus on communities outside of our own communities and our beloved solidarity circles. There's work to be done with solidarity circles. That's absolutely necessary, but we must broaden and enlarge the circle if we're going to utilize this momentum to be able to make an impact politically. Because ultimately, this is a political conflict. None of us can address the magnitude of the genocide damage being done. That's going to require billions and dozens of years. But politically, we can act to be able to move the needle starting from today. So first is get political. And I know I'm speaking a little bit to those of you who have been doing this, and I appreciate that. Starting with getting in the face of political America. The squad can give us some direction. There's more than what needs to be done than just what the squad has an appetite for, but we do have a starting point. And getting uncomfortable and addressing these politicians, these representatives, as bad as many of them are, is crucial for them to feel a pushback, especially post the last election. Then I would say proactively face the lawfare that's happening in American courts. Some of you may have already seen Just Vision's boycott film. I'm on the board of Just Vision. I'm proud of that. Boycott is aimed at an American audience, showing how legislation and the courts are being used and abused to be able to promote a foreign country's agenda, Israel's, using representatives at the state level, at the federal level, as pawns. There are other efforts that are working on lawfare issues like Palestine Legal and Global Echo, and there's many more. On the bottom right there, I added that yesterday. It's a friend of ours from Harvard, studies with my children. Elam is basically a Ghanaian who was in a demonstration a year ago, and a long story, but he was accused of abusing or pushing or something one of the pro-Israeli demonstrators that tried to come and disrupt the Palestinian demonstration. He's going through a devastating court hearing with Harvard and the Boston police. If you look up his name and Crimson, you'll see the article that came out yesterday. He was arraigned and pleaded not guilty. These may be frivolous lawsuits, but they take $25, $30, $40, $50,000 to clear your name. So these are serious efforts that are being done to basically kill pro-Palestinian students' careers. As I said, seek out new audiences, especially Jewish American audiences. And I say that very bluntly because the Jewish American audience is key for a multiple of reasons. One is they're a key audience, political player in the US, but also their relationship to Israel has an effect on what happens here in Palestine, Israel. And this is the community that has had their identity hijacked. If I took away your identity of your credit card and started charging, you would have a fit. You would call the police. A state has taken the identity of an entire community and pretends as if it represents it. The Jewish community should have an issue with that. Education for me is key. And on the next slide, I'm going to list a lot of Jewish and Israeli resources that I think should be used to make the case that this community is not pro-Israel no matter what they do. We need to be able to call out politically the efforts that are being done in the US, like the visa waiver program that the Biden administration gave as a gift to Israel. about a year and a half, 2 years ago, even though the most right-wing Israeli government came to power, abusing Palestinian and Muslim and pro-Palestinian Jewish visitors to Israel by blocking them from being able to come into the country. Even that was happening. The US gave Israel membership into the visa waiver program. That post-October 7th, the discrimination, especially against Arab Americans at the border, is still happening, and we should question why Israel still is allowed to be in this waiver program, given they're no longer meeting the requirements. Representative Bowman just sent a letter to the State Department about this. We need to be able to focus, and I call this political, the funding streams that come from Israel, come from the US to Israel. Things like US foreign aid, now that's a major issue. For the first time ever this week, I think, funding Israel is coming to Congress for a vote. And also not only the aid itself, but the special terms that the aid is given, which no other country that receives US aid in the world is given the same terms that Israel is given. We also need to be looking at Israeli bonds. These Israeli bonds have skyrocketed after October 7th. It's a non-regulated way that the Israeli state can get funds to be able not only to undertake the war on Gaza and the West Bank, but also to build their settlement enterprise. These bonds are probably in your state's coffers, and we need to be able to call out the states and our local governments not to buy these bonds. Likewise, the IRS's 501c3 status for nonprofits, US nonprofits, which are sending funds to Israeli settlements, should not be given tax-deductible status. That is like you, because you're funding that, is coming out of your pockets. Instead of them paying taxes as an NGO, they are not paying taxes and serving Israeli settlement enterprise, or worse, like addressing needs of the IDF directly. And then we have to remember that political also means local government. I suggest a lot of times for people to start in their local community. Create a sister city relationship with a Palestinian city. How about Bethlehem? That was branded a long time ago. People will know it. And if X city in the US creates a sister city with Bethlehem or any other Palestinian city, you will see the pro-Israeli elements in your community come out of the woodwork. Because even though the sister city relationship itself could be cultural, could be educational, could be sport related, that humanizes Palestinians, and they don't want to see that to happen. So that's just a list of political things. You don't see on this list, go to a demonstration or write a letter. I'm assuming you're all doing those things already. Get focused. The right-hand side there is an Israeli patch on a soldier. They're not talking about Palestine from the river to the sea. They're talking about Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that's a patch that actually represents the Nile to the Euphrates. So we need to get focused and not allow these sound bites to take us off track. One thing you can do, and I know many of you have done it, and I encourage those of you who have not, is to visit Palestine. Yes, even in this crisis, to visit. There's a lot to be gained by coming and seeing and talking and creating the personal relationships. So that would be my first recommendation. And I've met many, many groups that come through, and I can tell you that not only do some amazing people come through, but once you hear and you see it, you cannot unsee it, and you end up double downing on your efforts once you go home. Do your research. There's many, many sources for research. Al-Shabaka, the Palestinian Policy Network, Zitio, the new amazing media outlet, 972 Magazine, the Palestine Strategy Group, Monday Weiss, The Link, etc., etc., etc. Every single logo that you see on the screen right now is an Israeli or Jewish American organization. These are resources that are powerful when making the case for justice in Palestine and stopping the war. I highly encourage you to look these up and use them as resources. They create some amazing material. Intern in Palestine. If you're a student, come work here. Come work in an NGO. Come work in the private sector. Take 6 months and do whatever you do on the ground in Palestine. Believe me, it will be a learning experience like you've never seen before. And there's many examples of that happening. A lot of Jewish Americans actually come and intern here. I would like to see many more as well. Take your sabbatical in Palestine. If you work in education and you get time off to be able to do research and so forth, this is the place to research any topic you can think of, from healthcare to business to human rights to international law. This is a microcosm that you can't find anywhere else in the world that combines all of those things in a very small geographical location. And I highly recommend that each person think about doing something in their own field or discipline. The example I always give is Jeff Halper, our friend, activist. One time he was going to Maine, and I told him, "What the hell are you going to Maine for? There's no Israelis, Jewish, or Palestinians there." And he said, "I'm going to speak to Maine fishermen because I want them to relate to Gaza fishermen. And if we're talking about fish first, then the politics will follow. So find a common language with whatever community that you're involved with, and then the politics will work themselves in." I highly encourage that kind of approach. Get economic. Picture on the right. Israel's not only rampaging through Gaza and Lebanon, but they are entering homes there in Gaza and Lebanon and in the West Bank and stealing from the houses that they enter. He's a pretty happy guy, has a couple hundred dinars there. This is happening daily. I can tell you as a board member of a bank that our safe deposit boxes have increased in numbers unbelievably. Everyone is trying to put their valuables in a bank's box because they don't know if they're going to be the next house that the IDF will enter and end up stealing their goods. After 76 years, we need to keep in mind that a population under occupation needs to wake up every morning and live. And that's why I produced the following list. One, you can invest in Palestine, either through foreign direct investment, through our stock exchange. We have about 100 companies on the Palestinian exchange, which is you can find there. So investing in Palestine is important because if we want to see a community to be able to sustain jobs and value, that's one way to do it. Another way is to link Palestine to the world. You may not have the ability to invest in Palestine, but one of the organizations that I helped found, and I think the president of the organization is online with us here, is Americans for a Vibrant Palestinian Economy. And it's basically saying, let's try to link Palestinian businesses with American businesses. We as Palestinians, historically and now, understand our issue is with the government of the United States, not the people. And we think on a grassroots level, business linkages can help open markets, given our market is suppressed by Israeli occupation. And creating partnerships, different kinds of vested interest relationships, whether it's business-wise or otherwise. Churches can find a way to link up to souvenir shops in Bethlehem and help market their souvenir products for the holiday season that's coming up. That's as one example. I think there's many examples of how we can create partnerships at the NGO level or at the corporate level. And then I list here, and again, definitely not comprehensive, but just to give you a feel of some Palestinian-owned and rights-aligned businesses that I think are worthy of support. And again, there are many, many more. Taibeh beer. Anybody who has come here loves Taibeh beer. Taibeh beer is available in Palestine, but it's also available in about a dozen locations from Boston to California. If you go to their website, they have a map of all the places that they exist and where you can buy it. If your place of buying your alcohol does not have Taibeh beer, ask for it. Make a demand for it. Let them start calling Taibeh beer and asking how they can be added to the list. In the spirits world, we have a company which is a startup for about a year now. I just got introduced to, fierce and kind. 25% of everything they make goes into a foundation which supports efforts to help out the Palestinian community. Highly encourage your Christmas spirits come from fierce and kind. If you're in Canada, and I see some of my Canadian friends here, they will know Tamam Fine Cuisine Restaurant. It's also a place that carries out solidarity efforts and produces and generates meals for different efforts that are doing Palestinian solidarity work in Canada. You can visit them if you're in Canada, in Vancouver. Powbox is a rather unique kind of company that sends out a subscription box full of Palestinian goods every quarter, I think it is. And you can gift that, and the gift will last all year because every quarter they'll get a new box with a new set of products from Palestine, like olive oil and olive soap and things like that. Everyone's favorite, Ben & Jerry. Ben & Jerry is under the gun again, and they are in a clash with their mother company because the mother company is trying to shut them up in order not to support Palestinians and not to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. We all love Ben & Jerry's. They need to not only know that we're eating their product, they should hear from us as well. And Handmade Palestine is a global company based in Palestine that makes handicrafts here in Palestine, many of them from the refugee camps that we can use. And I threw in there the Boston Film Festival only because I was in Boston last month, and they have a film festival every month, and they have t-shirts and sweatshirts. So there are a lot of efforts that we can link into which support not only the companies listed, but also knowing that these companies also make donations to other efforts that are Palestinian related. Moving on, and the last slide here is engage in sustainable solidarity. That's important. These two volunteers are from If Not Now. They're doing the olive harvesting that we just came out of this month. But what can we do? We can start with what we're here today to talk about, the Green Olive Fund. Green Olives is something I'm proud to have known from its founding. I knew Fred when he was putting it together, and I became part of it. I became a member of the collective, and I actually present all my presentations and donate any income from those donations that come in to the Green Olive Tours. Green Olive Tours brings a lot of groups and a lot of quality groups. They don't bring 100 people at a time. Sometimes they bring 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, but very select people that once they bring them here, gives us the opportunity to link our issue into a community that usually doesn't hear about Palestine. Highly encourage you to support that, and I know more is going to be said about that shortly. Build Palestine, another effort that I was part of founding. It's created by local Palestinians, and it's out to do a social enterprise support. If you go to their website, they just issued a report last week of the social enterprise environment in Palestine, a fascinating read. Another one that I co-founded, Dahlia Association. I'm no longer with these, but Dahlia is a community foundation, the first real community foundation in Palestine. And it's basically saying, let's help ourselves and get people to support our agenda. Not a donor-driven agenda, but we have a Palestinian agenda built at the community level. Then whoever wants to help support can support. And lastly here is individual campaigns for all Gazans, those that are in Gaza struggling to survive, and those that were caught out of Gaza, either because they had to leave the war or they were out before the war started and found themselves losing dozens, if not more, close relatives, family members, siblings, while they were abroad. I can't even imagine the feelings they go through. One that I launched to help is Maham Henna, and you can see her campaign at epalestine.ps. But there are organizations that help individual Gazans as well. Heal Palestine actually helps mainly children who were wounded by bringing them to foreign hospitals. And you can see all the great effort they're doing. Steve Sosby is the person behind that effort. And United Palestinian Appeal, where I sit as an advisory board member, they do amazing work getting medicines and mental health experts into the communities to help individual Gazans and Palestinians in general, here and in Lebanon for United Palestine Appeal. Again, not a comprehensive list, but a good starting point. There's a concluding thought that I want to make, which is we need to all understand and absorb that this is a long-haul struggle. Not everyone will accept to go to the end, and that's okay. We Palestinians are going to the end. We are heading for statehood and liberation, and hopefully that liberation will bring liberation of Jewish Israelis as well. But we need to understand not everyone has that conviction or that stamina. So in the 100-yard race, I will hold your hand if you're going 5 yards, 10 yards, 50 yards, but know very well, and you can commit, you can know that we are committed to go all the way. So there's not one litmus test. You can do boycott, you can do divestment, you can do sanctions, you can do all three in the boycott, divestment, sanction campaign. Or you can do none of those and do something else. The non-violent puzzle of resistance is 1,001 pieces. We just need to be able to pick 1 or 2 or 3 and focus to make them have an impact. And then together we will prevail. And this is a picture from a kid in Gaza who refuses not to have an education, even in rubble. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for your insight and perspective, and for giving us some of the tools that we need so desperately in order to act meaningfully for that future of collective liberation for all that you referenced, and for giving us that index of different approaches that can orient us forward in the work towards a just future, from economic support of Palestinian life to economic intervention against companies and entities complicit in human rights violations of Palestinians, to community engagement and advocacy, and so many other specific community organizations, nonprofits doing mental health and medical aid, and so many other things. Truly, thank you for sharing your perspective and the many resources that you've worked so hard to develop over the years. Fred, I want to pass to you now and see if you have anything to add on to what Sam said, and anything else you'd like to share from your perspective about how to strategically engage in advocacy for a just future.
Okay, well, Sam covered a lot of bases there. Thank you, Sam. I'm just going to add a few comments before we move on to questions and discussion. You know, Sam mentioned the settler organizations in the United States, nonprofits and NGOs that collect and send over to Israel to the settlers tens, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And all of that is pretty much tax exempt from American taxpayers. This needs to be challenged, and challenged strongly. We need individuals, we need lawyers, we need organizations with resources in the United States to start challenging these organizations in a meaningful way. Now, we actually had a big win in this area recently. The Canadian Supreme Court threw out an appeal by the Jewish National Fund, which is now completely decertified as a tax-exempt organization in Canada. Now, this was the end result of more than a decade of dedicated work by a lot of activists and organizations with the resources to mount a legal campaign. We need to try and develop a similar campaign in the United States. The Jewish National Fund, which goes back about 120 years in this country, collects money from people in over 50 countries. And in all of those countries, except Canada now, the organization is tax exempt. 501c3, they call it in the United States. And they raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that come over to Israel and support basically the stealing of land. There's so much going on here that's a result of the activities of the JNF. Now, the JNF in Israel is basically a branch of the Israeli government. And even the JNF in the United States, the senior executives hold Israeli diplomatic passports, even though they live and work in the United States. that has to be challenged. They need to be forced to register as an agency of a foreign government, which is a whole different category of nonprofit. So I encourage all of you who are involved in organizations that may have resources to start moving in that direction to develop challenges. And that starts at the bureaucratic level in the federal government and the state level also where the charities are registered. BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which I know probably most of you are already practicing on a personal level and perhaps on an organizational level are spreading information about BDS. But never forget that in South Africa during the apartheid era, there was also a boycott. But that boycott was escalated to national government levels. It became illegal for American corporations and corporations registered in many European countries to do business with South Africa. And it was that economic pressure that finally brought down the South African apartheid regime. So those of you involved in BDS need to be liaising with your government representatives at a national level and start moving towards the point where governments will start boycotting the state of Israel. Now, keep in mind that almost every electronic component we use, from our smartphones to our laptops, have Israeli technology inside. It's probably virtually impossible to completely boycott the Israeli economy, but great strides remain to be made. And we're counting on all of you to help with that. Sam talked about getting political, and I just want to endorse everything he said, that political lobbying to elected officials, whether they're local councillors or national representatives, members of parliament, senators, etc., is very, very important. Building relationships with your local elected representatives, your national elected representatives, building relationships with their staff, providing with them with information, which we can help provide, Sam can help provide. There's no end of information that's available. It's a matter of getting through to the right people and providing them with analysis and appropriate information to continue the pressure at the national level in the countries you live in to influence the foreign policy of the governments there. And finally, I just want to mention the Green Olive Solidarity Circles, which Erez has been busy developing during this year. We now have, in addition to our membership base, many of the members, mostly who belong to existing organizations, have formed Green Olive Solidarity Circles. Erez hosts them every month. Each circle, they have a webinar. Some of you are probably members of these circles. We connect them directly with Palestinians in villages in the South Hebron Hills, with farmers. There's usually every webinar, there's a representative to speak to directly. It's very important to be supporting the people on the ground, the Palestinians who are getting their houses destroyed, who are being attacked by settlers, to learn from them and to use that information for your work in your home countries. So those of you who are already members and are not members of a Solidarity Circle, I really encourage you to think about forming one or joining one. Many of our Solidarity Circles are within existing groups. So it could be a group of people from your workplace. It could be a group from your place of worship. It could be a group from your book club or your gym. Please spread the word. Talk to your family, friends, and colleagues. Get them signing up as members of the Green Olive Collective and create a Solidarity Circle. And Erez can be in touch with you. You can send him an email and he'll give you a lot of information about how that process works. So I think that's about all my comments for now. Erez, if you want to start with the questions, let's see where the discussion goes from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fred. And yes, if anyone is interested in starting a Solidarity Circle or joining the Green Olive Solidarity Network as individuals, please do reach out to me, and I'll also share a link for it in the chat momentarily. It's very much in the spirit of sister cities, like Sam suggested earlier, not a direct community link, but connecting communities around the world to a network of co-resistance and steadfast activism on the ground and being invited into those relationships that have been built. So please do reach out. Before moving to questions, I guess I just want to share back what I heard from so much of what you're saying, which is saying there are so many ways to get involved, and everyone can act from the position they're in as part of the communities and spheres they're part of to do the work of collective transformation towards a just future. Whether you are in the arts, healthcare, other sectors, and anywhere in the world, it's important to act. And these resources and perspectives can give you the tools to do so. Along those lines, I want to move towards the first question and I think I'll ask them myself just for the sake of time, from Julian and Sherry, who asked if the both of you could speak about the role of justice advocates outside of the United States. Of course, the United States is if not the key world power, supporting occupation and apartheid, and backing as a patron the current campaign in Gaza. But of course, many European nations and others are also complicit. What are some other high priority locations, and what are perspectives you can give to people in Europe, South America, Central America, elsewhere? Sam, do you want to begin, and then I'll move to you, Fred?
I must apologize because my presentation and my insight is US focused, only because I'm an American citizen as well, and that's where I spend a lot of my focus. However, there are other areas that require concentrated efforts. For example, Germany. Germany has become vicious as it relates to Palestinian solidarity, Palestinian rights. They are legislating against not only activity, but also usage of words like Nekbe or things like that. So Germany has a special place for us to be able to focus on, especially since after the US, they're the second largest arms supplier to Israel. So they have a role to play. Another area that I know of that can be focused on is Turkey. Turkey publicly is in total solidarity with the Palestinians. But as I learned recently, about 70–80% of Israeli fuel supply comes through Turkey. So we don't want to only talk the talk of Palestine. We want to call on these governments to be able to walk the walk as well and turn their solidarity for Palestine into policy to not continue to contribute in their different kinds of ways to the ongoing genocide or the ongoing occupation and apartheid, for that matter. So we don't want to hear countries just parakeet supporting statements. We want to get focused and get political and make sure that we call them on actual legislation and actions that they can take, especially if you're in a place like the US, where US laws are being broken. We're not asking the Americans to wake up to international law all of a sudden. We're asking them to respect their own laws. And that's where Biden administration failed. And that's where we need to hold them accountable. Central and South America are rather aligned with the Palestinian issue. And a good place to look at where to focus is in the UN votes that happen rather frequently now on Palestinian issues or the ceasefire. You will find the mass majority of the world is voting for ceasefire and for the state of Palestine, and 7, 8, or 9, most of them Pacific Islands, with the US and Israel voting against. So a couple European countries like Hungary, for example, are consistently voting against anything Palestinian related. These are the different international places that need more focus. But the mass majority of the world is already on board. And we just need to make sure that laws are followed. And as much as international law is failing Gaza today, it's failing Lebanon today, it's the only thing we have as a framework to latch on to. So the issue is not that the law is bad. The issue is that those who are responsible for upholding the law are not doing their job. And that's where we as civil society have to come in to make them hear our voices and know that there's a price to pay to break laws, whether you're in Germany, Hungary, or the US.
Thank you, Sam.
I'll talk a little bit about the UK. Some of you might know I I was born and raised in Edinburgh, and the last few years I've been spending quite a bit of time there, basically divide my time between there and here in Jaffa. The UK has a very, I think, bizarre political landscape at this point. Increasingly, over the last couple of decades, there's been various repressive laws being passed restricting the freedom of expression and the right to protest. And they're criminalizing activities that even here in Israel are not criminal acts, acts that usually fall under civil law. These have to be challenged because they're aimed at the pro-Palestinian movement, the anti-war movement, and the anti-apartheid movement as it focuses here in Israel and Palestine. For example, there was just a couple of months ago, there was 3 people having a phone call. Their phone call was tapped. They were organizing a demonstration which included the blocking of a highway, which is often done in many countries as a kind of standard form of civil disobedience to draw attention to a particular issue, in this case, Israel-Palestine. And they were arrested, charged under a terrorism law that was recently passed by the British government. And they were charged under a conspiracy law that's about 100 years old and was aimed at the mafia way back when. The leader of the group, for a phone call, keep in mind, got 5 years in jail. A couple of weeks ago, 3 young women were arrested and held without bail because they were in a protest, holding up signs that said fairly innocuous and common slogans supporting the Palestinian cause, supporting the Nakba, from the river to the sea, we shall be free, that type of thing. And they're charged under the terrorism laws. That has to be fought, and fought with force, with nonviolent force, through political action, because otherwise, and keep in mind, who did the Israelis learn from? They learned from the British. A lot of the Israeli laws, the laws of detention here, came from the British Mandate and continue to this day, and they've been deepened. In the States, you have the laws that were passed after the 9/11 World Trade Center. And in Britain, they have similar laws that define terrorism in very broad terms. The definition of anti-Semitism, equating that with anti-Zionism, has been criminalized through passing new laws. This has to be fought. And in addition, all the things that Sam and I have said about lobbying your local politicians, getting up to the national level, and influencing foreign policy in Europe, in the UK, in Brussels, in the EU, these are very, very important things to be getting involved in.
Thank you both. Supremely important, and the interventions to be made in the UK, US, and elsewhere are supremely important. I'll add that I think in a webinar that Green Olive hosted with the American Friends Service Committee several months ago, we were told that the US supplies about 70% of arms from abroad, coming from abroad, and Germany close to the other 30%. Of course, the UK also is a key diplomatic supporter. So all of these are strategic sites, and the movements around the world to create economic pressure and intervention are critical and strategic. I'll move to the last question now, and maybe start with you, Fred. Ellen Gallant asked, how do we visit Palestine to support the communities and do good work? I thought you would, of course, have some thoughts.
Okay. Well, we encourage all of you to visit, whether through Green Olive programs or individually or with other organizations. Of course, we hope you'll come with the Green Olive program. Visiting is relatively easy. Right now, it's a bit difficult because there's a limited number of airlines that actually fly into Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv. In fact, when I flew, I was in the States for a little while visiting my son, and I had to fly back here. And I had a flight from London to Amman even, and that was canceled. I had to fly via Doha and then back to Amman and then overland into Israel, Palestine. But whatever method you use to get here, we can assist. We're familiar with all the routes. If you fly into Amman, we have a pretty seamless overland transport network with private drivers and buses that we can bring you in without any problem. And our programs on the ground are varied. We can do private tours for groups, for university study groups, for groups from other organizations. We often do that. Or you can sign up as an individual for one of our solidarity missions or one of our other tours. All our tours are technically still running, although most of them don't run because there's very few visitors, quite frankly. In fact, most of the visitors who are coming to this country are our political opposition. Evangelical Christians, plane loads of them, are coming here every week for their version of solidarity, which is to help the Israeli state. We need more of you to come. Unfortunately, our last solidarity mission, which was in September, had to be canceled because the flights were canceled. People had booked themselves to come straight into Ben Gurion, and the flights were canceled on fairly short notice, and so the mission was canceled. We held one a few months before that was successful. We have several coming up next year. You can find all the information on our website. Also on the website, if you just click the contact button, a message will be sent to my co-managing partner, Palestinian colleague Jihan, and she does all the logistical work and management work for our tours and our missions, and she'll be happy to help you figure out any issues that you have with getting here and participating in one of these tours.
Thanks, Fred. I'll add to that quickly and just saying, if you find yourself on the ground in general, we also bring people to the West Bank, to Palestinian communities living directly under military rule, for solidarity visits and work days. Actually, Sam, the picture you shared the other day, I'm curious where you find it. You said it was two If Not Now members, and they may be members of If Not Now, but I was happy to see the picture because it was from the Green Olive and All That's Left work day from several weeks ago. We were in Tawani harvesting, so that's great. So if people are on the ground and want to come to the olive harvest, to work in greenhouses in Bourine and the northern West Bank and other places, always reach out. We have a schedule on our website. And to one other thing you mentioned, Fred, around evangelical Christian support, Sam rightly mentioned the important geopolitical role that the Jewish community has. But of course, in the United States, CUFI, Christians United for Israel, has more members than there are Jewish people in the United States. So also for Christian communities, faith communities of all kinds, and anyone concerned with justice, we have to rightly orient towards the interest groups and players at hand, and from all of our positions, from all of our communities, make change. Sam, because we're nearing the end of the session, I'd love to ask you if you have any closing thoughts, remarks, or any last perspective you wish to share with everyone here.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming and hearing it out, knowing that we're only presenting a limited number of opportunities, but also knowing the Green Olive Collective has been doing work for years now in a sustainable way. There's so many people on the call. I want to give a shout out to Dean and Nader and Ed. I mean, all of you have been amazing in your support, and I appreciate that. And I'm sure there's others that I've missed. What I would just end with is a challenge to everyone. It's a challenge which says, when I say get focused and act, I actually really mean it. Like, I would love if everyone on this call tomorrow can send an email, fax, letter, whatever you use to communicate to your representatives, and ask if your local government, whether local municipality or state government, has a holding in Israeli bonds, and send me whatever result you get. And I will make sure that information gets used either in writings or in those that are doing campaigns against Israeli bonds. But having 125 people around the world here, everybody can ask their local government, does our treasury own Israeli bonds? Just inquiry and get a reply. That in itself will shake things up again. Israeli bonds are bonds that Israel produces and sells in order to take the cash and use it, and they pay you back over time. So it's an easy way for them to get free financing, basically, because it's totally unregulated. Those funds can be put into settlements and nobody questions the issue. So that's an action item that we can all take for getting input into what is the reality out there for bonds. And there is I think Jewish Voice for Peace has a campaign someone just put out, which is focusing specifically on Israeli bonds. One topic, but let's deep dive into the topics as much as possible. And there's a billion other things, but that's just one. So thank you again for all coming.
Thank you, Sam, and I hope we take your challenge to heart and take what we heard today as motivation to act in all the ways we can. Fred, I'll pass to you now also for any closing remarks and
Okay.
last thoughts you want to share.
Thanks, Aris, and thank you, Sam. As most of you know, the Green Olive Collective is a really unique organization of both Palestinians and Israelis working together for what I like to call a more civilized future, to help ultimately transform our country into a place where all people, Palestinians and Israelis alike, can hold their heads high in the sure knowledge of their rights, their freedoms, and their security. As we mentioned, we have what we like to call an educational tour company. And prior to COVID-19, all the surplus funds from this operation were plowed back into our solidarity and advocacy work. And in that way, we are a very unique social enterprise. There was a brief period after COVID when visitors started returning to the country, and then came October 7th last year, and the tragedy of that day and the greater tragedy that followed. So once again, we have no tourists in this country, because most of our tours are taken by mainstream tourists that we try and educate gently towards a progressive viewpoint on the situation here. But during this time of no tourists, we've managed to grow our membership program. And I'm happy to tell you we have now over 700 global members of the Green Olive Collective in over 30 countries. And I know many of you here today are already members. We aim for nothing less than the eventual non-violent regime change, to use a kind of cliche, to transform this political landscape between the river and the sea into a place where democratic rights are guaranteed and all forms of political repression give way to transformative justice and equal rights for everyone. Now, during COVID and the past year of outrageous violence, we managed to sustain our organization and even increase our solidarity and advocacy activities. And our plans for the future include an increase in this work on the ground, providing tangible support for Palestinian farmers and villagers in the West Bank who are under siege. In addition, we're going to be increasing our international advocacy activities in order to influence the foreign policies of governments, mostly in Europe, Westminster, Brussels, and of course, Washington, D.C. For this to succeed, we need your support. We're depending on you, our followers and supporters, to help increase our effectiveness and provide necessary tangible support. Many of you have already given generously in the past, and for this, we are profoundly grateful. In particular, we've had recent contributions, and I'd like to thank Jane for her contribution of $1,000. Gregory and Martin both contributed $500. Thank you so much. So now we're asking all of you to dig a little deeper. Our new initiative, the Green Olive Fund, is a strategic tool to help expand our work on the ground and grow our international advocacy. Aries is now posting a link where you can make a contribution. Please take action now. If you're not able to make a contribution at this time, please copy the link for later use, forward it to your friends, family, and colleagues. Our goal for November is $10,000. We are about a third of the way there. Your contribution, no matter how small or how great, will be critical to reaching this goal. If you're able to make a substantial contribution, then please do, with our gratitude. So we invite all of you to step up, become part of the process of the eventual redemption of this troubled land of ours. Also, unless you prefer to remain anonymous in your giving, please consider posting in the comments the amount of your pledge. Help inspire others. All of our work is focused on creating a future that we can be proud of, to hand off to our children and grandchildren, a place where all people are equal before the law, a place where Sam, Erez, myself, and all our colleagues and co-citizens and residents can look our children in the eye and assure them that we're working towards creating a better future. Help us do this. The Green Olive Fund is a tool towards that end, a tool that needs a sure foundation. You are the foundation. Your financial support enables our work. We have also established a giving circle, a community of what I like to call activist philanthropists, a group of senior contributors who will meet periodically online for our reports on progress and help develop more effective fundraising strategies. Do be in touch with me if you're interested in joining this group, the Giving Circle. My email address is going to be posted in the comments. Feel free. We're all totally heartbroken here by the events of the past year. Our hopes and dreams seem ever more distant, and yet our determination for change, our vision of the future is unwavering. Sam lives with his family in Ramallah, Erez is in Jerusalem, I'm in Jaffa with my daughter. All our communities and the larger society on both sides of the Green Line and in Gaza in particular are shattered and fractured. Yet our work sustains us, and your support underpins everything we do. We'll keep the link to the Green Olive Fund on the screen after the meeting ends. Please give as generously as you can, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us today, and especially thanks to Sam for his participation and to Erez from hosting. We all wish you a peaceful day. Until next time, bless you all.